I'm Jon Walsh, and I think there's still people here. Oh yeah, there's a couple good-looking guys right there. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. It's the wrong font, of course, but not a big deal. Founded Fuse Powered in 2009. Fortunate in the early days of mobile games to have some #1 game titles, free-to-play game titles, and built a publishing platform around that. One key component of the publishing platform we built was a mediation platform, and that's what I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about today and what we've learned. And about a year ago, this time officially joined up with Upsight, brought my company Fuse Powered, combined with Upsight to create one unified super-powered SDK. But I'm not going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about ad monetization and 3 easy steps to literally making 4 times more ad revenue. First, we'll look back at the evolution of mobile ads. You may remember, if you're as old as me, back in 2009, 2010, banner ads were the big thing. We evolved to static interstitial. Our good pals at Chartboost really innovated that. Nice job, Nate. And then we evolved to video interstitial and ultimately rewarded video. I'm here to talk about the next step, advanced rewarded video, and talk to you about how you can make a lot more money by doing some basic but pretty interesting things. So we're going to use some stats from an actual app. I've kind of rounded the numbers to make the math a little easier to digest. But this is a base case app that had 200,000, roughly, daily active users, delivering 200,000 impressions, ad impressions, rewarded video ad impressions specifically per day, generating about a $10 global eCPM. And one of the rules that this publisher had in place was that they were capping the number of rewarded videos a user could see every day at 30. Seems like a lot, but sort of an arbitrary cap that they put in place. First assumption is 200,000 daily active users, 200,000 impressions. That's about a 1 impression per daily active user ratio. That's low. We like to see a higher number than that. But these guys were just getting into it, and they were being pretty conservative, so roughly 1 ad per user per day. But let's look at that math a little bit deeper, because that's not actually correct. We're going to look at which players specifically were generating those 200,000 impressions. And the ratio is not at all 1 impression per daily active user, because only 14% of the users that were in that game were generating those impressions. So that means that only 28,000 players were seeing and engaging with rewarded videos. So that's 7.1 impressions per rewarded video viewer as opposed to 1-to-1. So you're seeing a lot fewer players seeing a lot more ads. That's obviously far too few. We want to expose as many players as we can to rewarded video, especially those that we know are not going to make in-app purchases, which is roughly 98% of your users, to try and generate revenue and also generate engagement that comes from rewarded video. So we got 3 steps that we want to go through here. The first one is make rewarded video engagement a top KPI. And what I mean by rewarded video engagement, or the rewarded video engagement rate specifically, is the percentage of total players viewing rewarded video. So in this case, it was 14% of all your players viewing rewarded video. Far too low. You can get that number up quite a bit by doing a number of simple things. So first of all, you got to measure that rate. So you have to know how many unique users are actually seeing rewarded video as a baseline case. In this case, 14% was very low. We wanted to work on that. There's only a handful of reasons that that's the case. One is conservative initial ad rules. So in other words, especially when a lot of publishers are getting into ads for the first time, they're pretty conservative around who they expose rewarded video to. They don't want to cannibalize a paying player. They don't want to drive players out of the app. So they tend to be very conservative when they step into showing ads. Look at those rules. I mean, we come across publishers all the time that want to wait till someone's been playing the game for 3 months, wait till they hit level 50, et cetera, et cetera. All of the time, those rules are too conservative, and they leave a lot of users out of the loop in terms of being able to engage with rewarded video, and ultimately they leave a lot of money on the table. So first of all, pretty restrictive rules. Second of all, they bury the rewarded video opportunities. So sometimes I still see publishers putting it in the in-app purchase section of the app, that if you want to earn a few virtual coins, that you can watch a video. Burying rewarded video is obviously makes it a lot harder for players to discover, and you end up with a very much lower engagement rate. Another thing that we're working on more and more with publishers is making the rewards themselves more engaging. So as an example, you might want to offer a reward of, say, gold or the standard currency early on in a game like cash. You get 500 gold for watching a video. Well, gold might be a pretty constrained resource early on in the game, but as players get more advanced and level up, they might end up with a lot of gold, but end up with a different currency that's constrained. So point is, make sure that the reward you're offering is contextual to the user and valuable to the user. Because if you offer gold and gold is in abundance later in the game, you're going to see a huge tail in terms of players engaging with rewarded video. And we spend a lot of time with our platform helping our publishers segment users by their behavior and being able to offer them dynamic rewards, or rewards that are different and contextual to where they are in the game and what currency they might need in the game. So make it valuable to them. And finally, we're big fans, of course, of interstitial rewarded video. So instead of making a user hunt around and find where they can get virtual currency, either a button or somewhere buried in the store, make it interstitial. So player hits a certain point in the game, the ad opt-in comes up automatically. Hey, you did this in the game. Do you want to see a rewarded video for this much currency? Don't make the players figure out how to get it. Make it part of the core game loop, and you'll see a lot higher engagement. Finally, best practices in any ads, test the creative and make sure that people are responding to the offer that you're making to them. But first and foremost, just remove as many restrictions as you can. We did that. We drove ad engagement up to about 40%. 40% is about the average we see across all the games in our platform. It's not stellar, but I think that's a reasonable benchmark to say 40% of your players are actually engaging with rewarded video. So what that does is it changes the base number. We had 28,000 daily active users delivering on average, or viewing on average 7.1 impressions at a $10 CPM and making you $2,000 a day. By improving your rewarded video engagement rate, we increased that number to 40%, which is 80,000 DAU. And we also know that these players are also going to behave very similarly to those initial 28,000 players. In fact, they're probably going to see more impressions, and they're probably going to perform better from a CPM perspective for reasons I'll explain in a few minutes. But for the base case, let's assume they behave like the other 28,000, they watch the same videos, and they earn the same CPM. So that just increased your CPM, or your daily revenue, from $2,000 to $5,680 a day. Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that audience that are actually seeing rewarded video and look at what they're doing. I mentioned earlier we have a 30 impression cap. So once people see 30 rewarded video impressions a day, they can't see anymore. They aren't shown any more ads. But how's that really affecting the user experience, the engagement of those users, and ultimately the revenue that you're generating? Here's the actual chart of the number of players in the system as a percentage and the percentage of total impressions. So you can see the giant line over to the right basically says that that's where we hit the cap. And you can see that a massive number of users and the percentage of ads were generated at that cap. In fact, just to make it a little simpler than seeing the chart, 30% of all the rewarded video watchers hit the cap, and 50% of all those impressions we delivered, the 568,000, occurred at that cap. So that's a really hard wall we're putting up for players that want to watch a lot of ads, that aren't paying, that are looking to generate virtual currency. So the second step of our three-step plan is to remove or actually measure these caps. And you can do that by A/B testing two separate groups and say, these guys are getting the cap, these users are not getting a cap. Let's let it run for a week or two, look at those downstream metrics, and make sure that we're not cannibalizing or having any negative metrics that we want to deal with. I can almost guarantee you that you will not see negative metrics. And in fact, the uncapped users will play more, and they will generate a lot more ad impressions. But pretty simple if you're using a reasonable analytics platform to segment those users and be able to evaluate whether you can or can't remove the cap. By and large, you can and should remove that ad cap. So we just extrapolated. This is now what the distribution of views looks like in terms of number of people watching ads. And you can see that it resembles more of a power curve. We see that natural decay, not this big wall. And we see a lot more impressions being generated by a smaller number of people. And the result of this in this particular case was 25% more impressions were delivered. So that's another 142,000 impressions delivered per day by that same audience of players by removing the cap. But unfortunately, these impressions aren't making publishers any money. And why? Well, that's because these campaigns, the vast majority of them are performance campaigns. And so I'm just going to give a quick rundown of how performance ads work. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but I'm just going to use this simple example to illustrate the point and how we got to a $10 CPM and why those users are not making any money. So I've used Game of War, our pals Machine Zone, obviously a very big performance advertiser. These metrics are made up. They're not real Machine Zone install or conversion metrics. I just use them to illustrate the point. So if 1,000 users see a rewarded video, approximately 5%, that can go up obviously or very greatly, 5% click through and go to the App Store, so you end up with 50 users. Those 50 users that go to the App Store, 4 of them will ultimately download and launch and play that game. Companies like Machine Zone pay on a per install basis. That's what a performance campaign is. They only pay when they get an install, so they track that campaign all the way back to the device and to the advertiser, et cetera, and they can see that those 1,000 views generated 4 installs that they paid $2.50 for, so they paid $10. We take the $10 we make, balance that against the 1,000 videos that we saw, and we end up with a $10 eCPM. That's why it's called an eCPM, because it's an effective CPM. It's not an actual CPM like you would typically see in advertising. So that's how we get to our $10 from a performance campaign. The problem is, when you have users that are watching 30, 40, 50 rewarded videos a day, they are not clicking, and they are, of course, not installing those games. They are actually just watching those videos to earn currency. When that happens, we call those players, for lack of a more affectionate term, grinders. Grinders that are just watching video to get currency are never clicking, they're never installing, and all of those impressions mathematically are making you $0. So, as we were discussing, 50% of the impressions were generated by these grinders that were watching at least 30 videos a day. All of the impressions delivered no installs and therefore no revenue. So we're going to do a little bit more math here and take those 568,000 impressions and we're going to split them 50-50. 284,000 of those came from the grinders. 284 came from people who watch less than 30 videos a day. The 284,000 that were non-grinders generated that amount of revenue, $5,680 a day. The other 284,000 impressions delivered by grinders, plus the 25% more impressions we got by removing the cap, also came from those grinders, which means there are 426,000 impressions that generated no revenue for us on that day. Fortunately, there's a solution, and this is where we get to a very emerging category of ads, merging a little slower than we would have hoped, but is now coming on strong, brand campaigns. And these are true CPM campaigns. So that means that advertisers, brand advertisers, just want to show a video. They're not trying to install an app or have any sort of performance criteria associated with that ad, other than they just want someone to watch the video. So we've used Coca-Cola. Brand advertisers obviously are just trying to show you that video as in the similar format that you'd see in a commercial. They just want brand exposure and awareness. They don't pay as much today as performance campaigns because the demand isn't there yet and there aren't enough advertisers and things like that. But conservatively, we're estimating that brand campaigns across the network can generate a CPM of about $5. So that's only about half of what you would get from a performance campaign. But they pay that $5 just by watching the video. So whether you're a regular player that's going to install or whether you're what we call a grinder who's watching tons of ads a day, they still pay that same CPM rate. So step 3 of the 3-step plan is to deliver CPM campaigns only to users that are unlikely to convert on CPI campaigns, as we've called them, grinders. So we're going to segment our audience into 2 distinct groups. To do that, we have to track user-level ad engagement to determine how many views, which people are seeing that many ads, and then we have to come up with that threshold. To illustrate the point here, we've called a grinder anyone who watches 30 or more rewarded videos a day. That's just our definition. There are way more advanced ways to determine that. We can track clicks and things like that. But let's just, for the sake of illustrating the math, say that anyone who views 30 or more rewarded videos a day is not installing anybody else's app, they're just doing it for the currency. The reality is there's probably a lot more. Well, we know there's a lot more wasted impressions there, and we can do a lot more advanced things to find them. But for illustrating the point here, let's assume that those players, 30 ads plus a day, are not installing, and we're going to give them CPM campaigns. So the result is that those 426,000 impressions you were getting absolutely 0 for, you're now getting a CPM of $5. So we had a case where 80,000 daily active users were generating you $5,680 off of 568,000 impressions. We know a lot of those impressions were worthless for performance. So this math, because we split them, is no longer relevant. Instead, we're going to look at how the math actually works once we've segmented our audience. So we take those people that watch less than 30 rewarded videos, and we keep showing them performance campaigns. So they're generating that same $5,680. But we're going to show branded ads to the grinders, which is 426,000 impressions at $5, which generates another $2,130 in incremental revenue. So now we've increased our revenue to $7,810 a day. So to recap, 3 steps. Start with $2,000 a day. You drive higher rewarded video ad engagement by loosening up the ad restrictions and measuring the impact and making sure that more of your audience, 40% or more ideally, are watching rewarded video. Second, you take a look at things like cap walls and evaluate them and remove them. In most cases, the vast majority of cases, every game's a little bit different, but I would say by and large, there's a 99% chance that an ad cap is hurting you and not helping you. Remove that to drive more impressions. And finally, segment your users into performance campaign and branded campaign viewers and show branded campaigns to users that are not converting on CPI campaigns, in other words, your grinders. And the end result is you end up going from $2,000 a day to $7,810 a day off the exact same audience. You've improved your engagement metrics because people are staying and playing and earning more currency that they're spending in the game. And that results in another $5,810 a day in revenue, or more than $2 million a year in incremental revenue by doing those 3 things. That's what we do at Upsight. Shameless plug, our Director of Ad Operations, handsome Barry DeLuia, he came up with a lot of these wacky ideas, and we have a full team that's responsible for working with our partners to drive this kind of experience and make sure that our publishers are not leaving any money on the table. So that's it for me. Thank you, guys.